While we were researching the history of Sonora, we came across a really interesting story about the murder of a local man named John Dudley Stone. We first heard about this story from our friend Dr. Savannah McCain. Then we heard the story again from Mr. Philip Hart. The story goes a little something like this. Way back in 1864, right after the Civil War had concluded, Mr. John Dudley Stone was murdered. He was killed in cold blood by a bushwhacker named Jim Ingram. Bushwhacking is an old style of guerrilla warfare that was used during the Revolutionary War and Civil War periods. It tended to happen in more of the rural areas of the South, which Sonora definitely fit that mold. It is believed that there was a distinct division in Sonora between the Union and the Confederacy at this time. There was clearly some tension between the Stone family and the Ingram family. Mr. Stone had just returned to tend his family, who had been suffering from a smallpox outbreak. The worst part of the story is that Mr. Stone's 13-year-old son witnessed the entire murder. John Stone, a mere youth, pledged to avenge his father's death. "When I become a man, I'm going to kill you," said the younger Stone. John Stone would grow up in the next few years without his father by his side. 4 years passed, seasons changed, and Reconstruction was on its way. The South was in the rebuilding process after the Civil War, and conflict had started to cool down. John Stone was now 18 years old and had grown up into a very mature young man. Some stories from the Stone family show that John left Sonora and spent the better part of his teenage years in Oklahoma living in an Indian reservation. However, John never forgot his vow of avenging his father. There was a period where John became very ill and was fearful that he indeed may pass away before he had the opportunity to complete his vow. John returned to Sonora and sought out Mr. Ingram. It was a Sunday. Jim Ingram was on his way to church. Some believe that Ingram had corrected his wrongdoings and became a preacher of that very church. This did not sway Stone's decision. After making some bullets by hand and planning out his attack, John Stone met Jim Ingram on the steps of that very church, called out to him, and said that his name was Stone. He indeed had become a man, and he was going to kill Mr. Ingram for what he had done to his father. A few short moments passed, and John Ingram's lifeless body fell to the steps of that very church. Stone had avenged his father and killed Jim Ingram only 4 years after his father's death.
Mr. Stone had no choice. He must go into hiding. He exiled himself into the U.S., a safe haven of the expanding country. He set root in California, living in places like Modesto, Prather, and Fresno. He started a ranch and restarting his life. John took a wife, which they named their first child, a little girl, Miami. John missed his family, but he had to live in secrecy. Only blood relatives could visit him, and it was a complete secret where he was hiding. Not even the husband or wives of a Stone were allowed to visit. He couldn't trust them, especially if they were Yankee from the north. Family members simply referred to him as Uncle John, and passed stories along of his tales in northwest Arkansas and out west in California.
During this time period of the Civil War, many men in this area served in the Union Army. However, Arkansas was clearly a southern state and had many ties to the Confederacy. Northwest Arkansas has always been unique. We have a very educated population due to being so close to the University of Arkansas. Agriculture and plantations were not as common up here near the Boston Mountains. It's difficult to farm on a bedrock of limestone, so slavery wasn't a huge deal up here. It's understandable that people in the Northwest region could sway towards the Union side of the war. Whether the bushwhacker in the story was a Confederate sympathizer or not, there was clearly tension in all areas. It's not fully known if these bushwhackers were opportunists and preying on the families of Civil War soldiers. The important thing to remember is that this event is a huge part in Civil War history and our history of the Sonora community, because this act happened so close to the very Sonora school we have been studying.